morning, students. The first topic that I am going to start today is equijoin. An equijoin is a join condition containing an equality operator. Equijoin is similar to the inner join, which fetches matching records from more than one table. In the next slide, I will show you an example. An example of equijoin is shown by these two tables, student and subject. The table student has the primary key column roll number and the table subject has the primary key column subject ID. In addition to subject ID as the primary key column in the table subject, it also has the column roll number which exists in a different table student as a primary key. That is why as the column roll number exists in the table subject not as a primary key, that's why this column is treated as a foreign key in the table subject. An example of equijoin is demonstrated by the SQL query as shown in this slide. The SQL query uses the equality operator in the join condition s dot roll number is equal to sb dot roll number. That is why this type of join condition, since it uses the equality operator, is treated as an equijoin. The SQL query uses this equality operator to extract the entries of the columns roll number and name from the table student using the alias s, and the column subject name and marks from the table subject using the alias sb, by linking the primary key column roll number of the table student with the foreign key column roll number of the table subject using the aliases s for the table student and sb for the table subject respectively. The output of the query shows this following table with roll number, name, subject name and marks as the columns. So let's understand what is a cross join. Cross join is an unconditional join. It produces a cross combination of rows from the joining tables. The output of the cross join is also called Cartesian product. Consider the tables T1 and T2 as shown in this slide. The table T1 is having the columns I1 and C1, and the table T2 is having the columns I2 and C2. The output of cross join is also called Cartesian product. Now see the following cross join SQL query. Select star from T1 cross join T2. The output of this query will be the Cartesian product of the table T1 with the table T2. Now see the first row of the table T1. It has the entries 1 and A. Now for Cartesian product to happen, the first row entry 1A of the table T1 should be grouped with all the rows of the table T2. Hence 1A from the table T1 is first grouped with the first row entry 1P of the table T2. Then 1A is again grouped with the second row entry 2Q of the table T2, and then it is grouped with the third row entry 3R of the table T2. This is shown by the pointed arrows in the figure. Hence, the output of this cross join gives 1A 1P, 1A 2Q and 1A 3R as the row entries for the columns I1, C1, I2 and C2 respectively. This table is the Cartesian product when the first row of the table T1 is grouped with all the rows of the table T2. Hence 1A 1P, 1A 2Q and 1A 3R are the row entries for the columns I1, C1, I2 and C2 respectively. Similarly, for the second row of the table T1, it has the entries 2 and B, which is grouped with all the rows of the table T2. Hence, 2B from the table T1 is first grouped with the first row entry 1P of the table T2. Then 2B is again grouped with the second row entry 2Q of the table T2. And then it is grouped with the third row entry 3R of the table T2. This is shown by the pointed arrows in the figure. Hence the output of the cross join gives 2B 1P, 2B 2Q and 2B 3R as the row entries for the columns I1, C1, I2 and C2 respectively. The first table in the slide shows the cross join when the second row of the table T1 is grouped with all the rows of the table T2. Hence the output of this cross join gives 2B 1P, then 2B 2Q and then 2B 3R as the row entries for the columns I1, C1, I2 and C2 respectively. The second table in this slide shows the final output after the Cartesian product. As you can clearly see that each row in the first table T1 is grouped with all the rows in the second table T2 in the final output. As a result, you can clearly see that the first row entry 1A of the table T1 is grouped with all the row entries of the table T2. Similarly, the second row entry 2B of the table T1 is also grouped with all the rows of the table T2.